Hello, this is Chris Nelson for evolveconsciousness.org. I will be reading the article Dark, Negative, and Limited Trivium, Language and Reality Part 4. The content is 4.1, Ancient Magic to Modern Social Engineering. The two subsections are 4.1.1, Misdirection, and 4.1.2, Buying and Selling to Manifest Our Own Consequences. The next section is 4.2, Dark, Negative, Classical, and Limited Trivium, followed by the next 5 subsections, Problematic Rhetoric, Rhetorical Spectrum, Fallacy, Winding Road, and Greater Good Manipulation. So the first section, Ancient Magic to Modern Social Engineering. A magician of the modern age, a quote magician of the modern age, engages in a con game to deceive and manipulate the target's sense, perception, and comprehension of reality. That is what we agree to in this exchange, wanting to be fooled so we can experience wonder, amazement, awe, and mystery at something done. They hide things up their sleeves and trick us in clever ways. I just want to mention a side note that a lot of this is a big part of human psychology. We want to have wonder and mystery and try to figure things out. In fictional novels, people enjoy reading a book to try to figure out what the ending is. In certain television shows and movies, there's an aspect of mystery in trying to figure out what is happening. It's a wonder, a mystery. So this is an important part of the desires we have as humans. I just want to mention that. So they hide things up their sleeves and trick us in clever ways. In this way, a magician, a quote magician, is creating a false reality that we accept and buy into. It is wondrous and amazing to be It is wondrous and amazing to be bedazzled by this magic. This also ties into the wonder and amazement of new ideas and concepts, of which I've written previously on, and there's links to in the article. We can't erase an idea once it's in our head, although we may not accept it. And some are fantastic ideas that bring a sense of amazement and awe. An alchemical magician is not deceptive, but is direct with truth, expressing reality as it is. A dark sorcerer uses truth to manipulate people into falsity. They use tactics of deception, like the modern quote magician does, to create an unreality for us to accept. Also, the past infatuation with theater and acting, as well as modern, is based in this awe and wonderment, as we are fooled, although willingly, into believing false realities, fictions, these personas, these masks that people portray and pretend to be. That's what the actors do. However, we can often learn from the secondary experiences and allegories that are analogous to reality. These allegories create referential images in the mind that are similar to aspects of reality. It's a process of invoking images in the mind which can enrich our understanding of reality or be used to manipulate it. The classical trivium is based on the emphasis of effective rhetoric towards sophistry and clever oration as an art. This creates a false correlation that, quote, good speech, convincing speech, makes you a, quote, good person. It is to convince people and thereby create a status of being a person who is honest and true, all to gain favor and influence over others. This is all done through the image in the mind that you create through being a good orator. You create an image of being a good person, but it's all a deception of appearances. It's not based in substance. So this is part of emotional mind control. So I have a link here to video or an article and explains emotional mind control, how we're manipulated by our emotions into believing things because we're made to gain favor. People gain favor over us through these manipulation of images and emotions. Modern age sophistry is the politics to make people, quote, feel good and applaud for their leaders because they are convincing, making promises they can't deliver, a false pretense. It is telling people what they want to hear, things that sound impressive. It is counterfeit wisdom, anti-truth. The Trivium method is direct truth, not focused on effective communication to convince someone, but of simply speaking the truth about the condition of reality. The modern, quote, magician uses our attention against us to trick us into seeing things that are not really there, and buy into things that are not real. A modern, quote, magician can make us pick the card they want us to pick, or make us see what they want us to see. In life, this is having us, quote, choose our, quote, own path, while actually offering predetermined pathways for success. They have us looking at certain aspects of reality they want us to, so that we just go along with it. Much of it is based on suggestion, influence, neurolinguistic programming, and greater comprehension of the sensual and psychological domain to create various deceptions. We create images in our mind to deceive us. The true skill of the magician, this is a quote from Daryl Fitzke in Magician by Misdirection, page 33. The true skill of the magician is in the skill he exhibits in influencing the spectator's mind. So that's what modern magic is about. It's all about a show. You put on a show, and you influence the spectator's mind, because they're there to be entertained. And that's what most people's agreement is in the whole politics, is it's all an entertainment, and people buy into it. They don't have to buy into it, but they do. And they clap and they applaud, and they give their power over and representatives, and it's all a big game, and it's all a big mind screw up and manipulation, but everyone goes along with it. Everyone seems to enjoy it too much. I don't know. I don't enjoy it, even when I was unaware of everything that I'm aware of now. I never voted in my life because it always seemed idiotic to vote for a trick between perceptions of two idiots or three idiots. Whoever you vote for, it wasn't going to solve anything. So it seemed pointless, even though I didn't have any solutions or greater understanding. Anyways, to continue, some of us do break away and begin to think for ourselves more. We begin to want to know, to no longer want to be fooled by the images and delusions in the show, and want to overcome the fancy and acceptance of the spells the dark sorcerers have cast on our minds. Usually, a catalyst is required to shock us awake from our somnambulistic dream state. Once we get smacked awake by evil in our presence, or conscious awareness through secondary experience or knowledge, it can catalyze us to care more about what is going on, to care more for truth and morality by proxy of not wanting to be fooled anymore, to be deceived, manipulated, conned, and tricked, to no longer want to be wrong, is essentially it, in some aspect. That is when we go from being content with being fooled, as long as we are, quote, happy and, quote, feel good about the illusion we accept in our relative zone of comfort, to greater degrees of awakening and evolving consciousness, to work on uncovering reality more and more, to seek truth. At first, we don't know where we are going. We realize we are the fool, but we know we need to start the journey and begin to learn more about what is going on, because we are ignorant, fooled, and wrong, not knowing about what is really happening. That commences the journey from being a standard idiotic fool with no clue about reality to the initiated fool who begins the journey towards truth, whether they know it or not. That first bit of care is what started it for me. I can speak of this that many other people can also relate to because this is how it started for me in 2006. I can better describe it now due to the level of understanding I have about reality and myself. We pay for the trick. We buy it. To be entertained in wonder, in awe, amazement, and mystery. If we are not, quote, happy in, quote, feel-good satisfaction with our lives and the way we live, or of our understanding of reality and ourselves, most people still fail to learn more about it to empower themselves and seek more pleasure gratification to get rid of that subconscious unease, of unhappiness, of not feeling good about their lives and their understanding of reality. They just seek more gratification to get rid of that subconscious unease with humanity's overall condition and the direction we're heading in. Some people have the false self-indoctrination well established and are, quote, happy in this system, while others may have an unclear nagging discontent towards the way of life we currently engage in. Without a catalyst, most end up wandering the cyclical system loop and perpetuate more of the same anyways. Breaking past the illusions can be very difficult. Section 4.1.1 411 Misdirection. So a quote from the movie Swordfish from 2001. Misdirection. What the eye sees and the ears hear, the mind believes. What the eyes see and the ears hear, the mind believes. And that's often how easy it is to just trick people. Because if you go to the previous quote, the true skill of the magician is in the skill he exhibits in influencing the spectator's mind. So that's what it is. You show people something, you tell them something, so they see it and hear it, and then they're going to believe it. And that's how easy it is to fool, I guess, at least 90% of the population. They watch their TV, they watch the media, they even watch movies which are unreality, and they're taken as reality. I could give you Schindler's List is fiction. Do you know that movie's fiction? But people think it's reality. People think that that actually happened. There's a bunch of other movies people take as reality, even though it's not reality, and that it's a movie. But they think even though it's a movie, they think that that's actually what actually happened, that this actually happened, that this story is real. There's a lot of made-up stories that are taken for real, and all these are just examples of how this is going on right now in our modern day, in our current time. This isn't even how history is manipulated into the past. I have a book you can read on history, fact or fiction, science or fiction. The reality of history is not very knowable. We have little pieces. Anyways, if you want to get into history and how knowable history is, I recommend you look into it. It might get you into solipsism or nihilism, but you can get out of it. I did. But it's very knowledgeable to know how how easily our understanding of what actually happened can be manipulated. Even right now, just based on movies, on stories. The science of imagery, the stories people tell through images in movies or images in the books that we create in our minds from the symbols on those pages. This creates an unreality that we take as reality, and then we think that we're going to actually know about history from 1,000, 2,000 or more years ago. It's like it's a joke. You can have fragments of it, but then you're recreating a whole fantasy of that history. You can't know the history. You can know little parts, but the rest is just guesswork. And who knows? You can't know. That's the point. So you can have speculations and stuff, but you can't really know. And it's fascinating to look at how much history is fabricated and completely invented. That's a nice few-minute side topic, but it's very important for people to understand how we're completely manipulated about everything. All you need is language. What the eye sees and the ears hear, the mind believes. Tell people things, show them things, make them believe it, and there you go. There's your whole history created for you. You don't even know where you come from, really. You can't know where you come from. All you know is you're an animal. People have been manipulating us forever. Was there Jesus? Who knows? Was there a Moses? Who knows? These are stories. Are they based on reality? Yes. Did those actual events happen? Maybe. Maybe there were different names. This is the point. You can't know things about the past. All you can know is learn the lessons about reality, about morality, about truth. Those aren't relative to any time period. That's what's important about learning about history. It's not that whether it happened or not, you'll never be able to verify. So assume that it happened, assume that it didn't, whatever. Take that secondary experiential knowledge that's either fictional or non-fictional, but derive the truth from it and learn from that. So that's where you can learn from everything about ancient aliens, or how they manipulate us through the conceptions that they're superior, or the government and how they know better, or anything else that's manipulating us, and how certain people have the right to rule us. You can learn from stories and how some people who fought against oppression, and take that story of Jesus and learn morality from that story. Learn from stories. Don't necessarily accept them as true. Anyways, that's my rant. Enough about history. It's a huge topic, and it's important to understand how our reality is manipulated. So to continue, 411, misdirection. There are many things we can miss seeing or hearing, for we don't see or hear everything when our attention is focused on a specific. Misdirection takes advantage of the functionality and limits in human consciousness in order to give the wrong picture. In social engineering, this is to produce a false image and memory for recall and construction of secondary subjective reality for a basis of living. The mind of a typical audience member, the masses, can only concentrate on one thing at a time. The modern, quote, magician, the manipulator or sorcerer, uses this perceptual restriction to manipulate the audience's sensory input and ideas about reality, leading them to draw false conclusions about what actually occurred in reality, in actuality, in truth. One of the most important things to remember when thinking about misdirection and magic is this, and quote magic is this: a larger movement conceals a smaller movement. This is how social engineering media of shaping the collective public mind is used to direct our attention away from more important worldly matters. You know, there was Benghazi Gate, and then I think there was a missing plane or something. You know, there's always something important, and then there's a distraction. Something important, and then there's a distraction. It's all reality manipulation. This is what shapes our understanding. People don't have access to the criminals and evil things going on. They won't have any awareness that it's even happening. So isn't that what a, quote, magician does? They distract you from what is really going on, from what is really important, convinces you of something that is an illusion, an unreality, casts a spell on your mind to have unreality accepted as reality. So this first part tied into the part 3 of Language and Reality article series. But it ties into these dark manipulator sorcerers, which is the point of the dark negative trivium. Well, the power in that aspect, and then the limitation for the rest of us, which we'll be getting into shortly. The next section, 4.1.2, the subsection, I mean, buying and selling to manifest our own consequences. So I've already been talking about how we buy what they sell. This is how we manifest our own consequences, because we don't have to buy what they sell. This is where learning and truth and logic and thinking is why they're so important in our lives, because those are the tools that will empower us to not buy into the bullshit and lies and deceptions and manipulations, into falsity and evil. We'll finally be able to raise ourselves into alignment with truth and morality. People sell us beliefs in order for certain deceptive false constructs to continue to be accepted. As a result, we pay with the currency of our time, attention, and energy directed into perpetuating them. We buy into them, thinking they are legitimate, good, helping, or required, and we feed their sustainment and growth in existence, creating unreality into reality. We are buying what they sell. We buy the political rhetoric. We buy the, quote, magical illusions. We want to, quote, feel good, and they make us feel good. They motivate us, they stimulate us, etc. So we buy into what they sell because we are suckers for sophistry, emotional mind control, and other fallacies. We want to feel good, and they make us feel good, and that's one of the tools of manipulation, and we fall for it because that's one of the problems is we seek pleasure and avoid pain. I have more notes on that allegory of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, but it would have been a good place to include it, but I didn't include it here. I guess it will be a future post. This is how we manifest the word spells cast onto our consciousness in existence. We do it directly or allow others to do it. We don't have to buy into it. Then it has no power over us. We empower the spells into manifestation by engaging in acts that allow them to exist. All the, quote, laws that get invented by men, all the governments, money, everything is illusory and only exists because we give it the power to exist by creating it ourselves or allowing others to do it, others to create it. Because we're in a co-created reality. We can't control everything, just ourselves. We can only control ourselves, but influence others. To continue, we are all in this together on one spaceship, planet Earth. If people believe in falsity, then they behave according to falsity, and they create a world of falsity. This is how we co-create our self-imposed enslavement and self-inflicted suffering in the aggregate whole of humanity. I'm not talking about individual, I'm talking about aggregate. The individual unit is what creates the totality of the whole sphere of humanity, but the individual karma, natural law, is localized, while the karma, natural law of the aggregate, is applied to all individuals as a collective condition of existing in one system, spaceship Earth. So I'll be getting more into natural law into the future to clarify exactly how we are essentially natural law. We are the natural law agents in the individual localized sphere. In the collective sphere, we are also the natural law agents, but there's a collective aspect that can be likened to a force in which we reap our own actions. Anyways, this has to be developed more. I'm just giving sneak peek into what's coming ahead in my work in the next big project presentation I will have on natural law. To continue, word alterations, how do they appear? Is it always organic from people associating words that have the same sound or meaning together that brings about a reversal or opposite in their meaning? Or is it also an organized effort to change certain words? Sometimes words can be created to create a perception of reality, and then it can be altered later by influence. Alterations can be done to existing words by putting out material, media, that uses the word in a certain way to induce it with the meaning of the context it is used in rather than the older meaning. This influences the use of the word and develops into common use of the language. So this part I briefly mentioned in the last part, I think, in the creation of words and who's creating them and how they can be altered. I'm getting into, and this is tying into the history, because who creates the history? Who writes the history? It's important to understand all these things as it all ties in together. The power of learning and knowledge, and to write memory into knowledge, and who has this power when most of the world is illiterate. So who created the history that we believe in? Who was even writing down history that was supposed to be true decades, centuries, millennia ago? Alright, think about that. So next, to continue. Who has the power to publish literature in older times? The scholars, the scribes. It was always academia or the rulers who had the money to learn these skills and pay others to create stories for them. Those who were literate and could write, the scribes, were in pay by the ruling elite. Earlier, there were the priests who were the script keepers. They created the words to express vocal meaning in reality and could alter the perception of reality according to a story they told about reality. Oratory is a powerful tool for this reason because prior to writing, the only method of communication and influence was through speech. And previously in article number 2, modalities of thought, that would be the mythopoeic modality before the philosophic one, where you had just oration. And then it eventually went into written form, but eventually it always starts off as verbal. To continue, priests were the old-time storytellers who had the power of the science of imagery to create images in the mind from the telling of stories, creating narratives and conceptions about reality. Oratory skill, rhetoric, sophistry, clever speech, these were used to win over the hearts and minds of people. Images and imagination are a fundamental part of human consciousness, to enslave us or free us. Restrict imagination of possibilities, and you can feed the masses your images as what is real and possible. Quote real and quote possible. Unreality becomes reality. So here I have two images. One's a limited inverse trivium. It's for the masses to be fooled. So in the limited grammar input, that's where there's a control of reality, what is available for you to be aware of. So by restricting the language and the words and what is input as available information on what is in reality, you're limiting the grammar input. So then you're going to get to logic, a limited logic processing, because you're not going to be able to process as much of reality, but even in that limitation of data input for processing of reality, they're going to even restrict your ability to process reality. So instead of how to think, it's going to be what to think. That's how they're going to train you to believe what to think instead of teaching you how to think for yourself. And then in our output, in the rhetoric, it's limited. We have a limited word input. We have limited word usage. The meanings have been changed to constrict our understanding of reality. It reduces the meaning. They invent new words, and then we have new speak. And there's many, many areas where we can have the limited output in speech to understand reality, and limited output in behavior and living correctly in reality. So all this restricts our imagination and consciousness inside the triangle. Language is used to control and limit consciousness, the control of reality through the ability to perceive and discern accurately. The next infographic is the negative circle of life, which is based on the circle of life, which incorporates natural law, trivium, consciousness, causality, and maybe something else, I forget. So you can go look at that presentation I have on my site as well as an infographic on the circle of life. So this is the negative circle of life. Again, this is for the masses to be fooled. So with a limited grammar, you have limited input. That restricts your thought. That produces ignorance, which is less knowledge, and false knowledge as well, negative knowledge. So you limit logic, you limit the processing. Part of that is from the restriction of thought, you have emotional mind control. If you go with the circle of life, there's corollaries. Limit grammar would be just grammar. Limit logic would be just logic. Limit rhetoric would be just to develop all these three. Restrict thought is just thought. Emotional mind control is just emotion. And restricting possible actions and behaviors is just regular actions and behaviors. And the ignorance is usually knowledge. Apathy is usually care. And the courage and laziness is usually the cowardice and laziness is usually courage and will. So as we go through the circle and the triangle, restrict thought, you get to emotional mind control. From the limitation of processing reality, you're manipulated by your emotions. You can also have apathetic, you have less care. They manipulate us into being more apathetic, have less care for truth and morality. We have a limited output. It restricts our possible actions and behavior. We're cowardly, we're lazy towards the truth and morality, standing in it and living it. We have less courage and will, and we act more immorally and evil in the world as a result of this limited trivium being applied on us. Section 4.2, the dark, negative, classical, and limited trivium. There is the real trivium method for truth, and there is the classical trivium for control and manipulation while possibly convincing yourself you are doing, quote, good and right. That is, if you don't already know exactly what you are doing, which would be wrong and evil. The training in the classical trivium is to get ahead and win, to survive within the constructs of the systems of society and try to manipulate your way to the top. If you do not have access to more precise trivium methodologies, such as the classical trivium in private education institutions, then the limited trivium is what you are taught as the standard of thought processing that mirrors others around you, as this is the norm for everyone to think this way. That's the limited trivium, as I've been talking about. They give us that methodology to live and be in order to live in their way. They do it knowingly, we do it in ignorance, but it's through the ignorance of the limitation of ourselves and reality. So that's the limited trivium. The classical trivium teaches knowledge of how to gain relative degrees of freedom within the corrupted system. Without access to the ladder climbing capabilities of the system, you don't have access to the comforts or survival mechanisms that the system provides. Standard education is introduced as a way to convincingly coerce people into conformity with the system in an effort to maximize their survivability in that system. If you can't learn of the manipulative ways of the corrupt system, then you can work your way to higher levels. If you can learn, I said can't. If you can learn of the manipulative ways of the corrupt system, then you can work your way to higher levels of control and comfort. That's why you need the dark and negative classical trivium, which is the way to navigate and survive within the constructs of this corrupt system we live in order to get ahead, dog eat dog, get to the top, and rule other people instead of being ruled over. There'll be an infographic describing the dark negative trivium for the manipulators, but I'm just doing a segue between the limited trivium and how they use it against us and how they have a better trivium. It's a flawed one too, but they actually know how to use the modalities of the trivium, grammar, logic, and rhetoric, more effectively than people who have the limited trivium. But theirs is the dark and negative trivium because it's not used for the light and truth of the trivium method's original purpose. Many people prefer presentation and appearance over the substance of truth that counts. People have been conditioned into diluted forms of the classical trivium for manipulation to navigate the human constructed world and get ahead, into a more limited trivium that keeps only the limiting aspects. More specifically, conditioning into a dilution of the true rhetorical art form into resembling that of manipulative sophistry, that of preferring an effective, aesthetically appealing presentation to the eyes, ears, or other senses, than the trivium method's central search for truth, regardless of the appearance, garb, and presentation that a message is delivered in. Logic is at the center in the trivium, concerned with truth, and is the art of arts to direct our actions in life. People prefer and sometimes require in their false conditioned selves to hear a message in a pleasing way, which is emotional mind control, or to have the message align with their pre-existing concepts, or else they tend to reject that message. They are infected with the corrupted art of rhetoric as sophistry, the art of persuasion and influence through, quote, aesthetic pleasantry, putting truth secondary in consideration, which has taken truth out of central focus. This is similar to the, quote, magical diversion of attention, as the focus is not where it should be, on truth. So this is distraction of magic. We get you to divert your attention from the most important prime capital, truth and morality. Effective convincing is preferred to actual truth in the devolved form of the trivium, such as the classical trivium and the limited trivium of the masses. I put logic as central because it is focused on truth, and this is the goal of the trivium method as I define it. It is true, the end goal of communicating it to others is important. That is the goal, to effect change and influence in others about how reality functions. But the truth is found in logic, and this should be the central focus, which is to ultimately be expressed in the culmination of the trivium. Rhetoric. The active expression of truth. Which is to ultimately be expressed in the culmination of the trivium, rhetoric, the active expression of that truth discovered. That's the point of rhetoric, is to express what you understand through logic. The active expression is the output, but the output itself is based on the processing from within consciousness itself, which is where logic is used. The resulting output is based on the input and the processing. They are more important in terms of producing the right action output, as the rhetoric itself is not what produces that right action. It is the expression of action itself, not how the action was produced. While the output itself is what matters in the end, we still require accurate and correct means to get there, which is the grammar and logic. The overemphasis on the effectiveness of rhetoric as the master art, as Sister Miriam Joseph puts it, will cloud our position and ability to stand in truth, represent the truth accurately, and in the end, find the truth correctly. The grammar and logic are the most important in order to produce the rhetoric to share the truth. Thoughts and emotions are the important internal aspects of consciousness that will produce the actions to change things. If we corrupted grammar or logic, our rhetoric will be corrupted. The same is so for thoughts, emotions, and action. Just as logic is the central process to get us to know what we are going to do, emotions via care are what motivate us to do what we do after we figure it out and stand in conviction of our conclusions, right or wrong. And that would be the processing. After we process and understand, then we can care to do something right or wrong. So the infographic for the next section, 4.2.1, problematic rhetoric, is the dark, false, negative trivium, which is classical trivium, sophistry, and manipulative rhetoric. This is for the manipulators to fool others, as opposed for the masses to be fooled. This is dark knowledge. We have corrupted knowledge. It can be accurate or not. It's corrupted. You take accurate knowledge and then you twist it. Then you have dark care. We have corrupted care. You're not concerned about doing right. You're concerned about doing wrong. Or you don't care about doing right. You just do what you want to do. Whatever your wishes are that promote your survival. And then you have your dark will. You're in active falsity. Once you've chosen to do what you do, well, you act in it. And because you have corrupted dark knowledge and corrupted care, well, you're most likely going to be acting in falsity most of the time. And the point is to convince, manipulate, win, and get ahead. That's why you have all these corrupted aspects. And that's why people, I guess I'll be talking about that in, I mentioned it previously in other articles in the past. The Ivy League schools, they train for this purpose, to convince, manipulate, win, and get ahead in our system, which is what I mentioned previously. It's all about surviving, to maximize your survivability. and get on top. So problematic rhetoric. The dark trivium is the dark, negative, and false trivium as the classical trivium is in its purpose. Rhetoric is the culminating output of the internal modalities of grammar and logic. Rhetoric results from the other two and is dependent upon them as the foundation for output. The output action is what counts in the end, but the input and processing are what determines the output. The inner tools of grammar and logic can be limited and therefore provide a limited or foolish rhetoric, but the grammar and logic can also be developed, yet willingly produce false, corrupted rhetoric in order to manipulate others into falsity. So you can have accurate knowledge and care, but I guess your care would be corrupted if you want to manipulate others, and that would produce the corrupted rhetoric as well. But you can have accurate knowledge and then just twist it to however you want to manipulate others, because that's your goal. Your rhetoric is determined by your logic to choose what rhetoric to use. Words don't just come out by themselves through rhetoric, they are preceded in structure by logic to formulate the specific rhetoric. If there is no logic, then I don't understand how a structured rational communication can even be created. Logic is required, as is grammar. It is always the logic and grammar that matter most in the creation of the rhetoric to communicate about reality. The rhetoric is only the action output, it is not the reason, the why, for the output. The why of logic determined how you output. The how was not done by a cognitive process of rhetoric, it was done by logic, and the output itself is known as rhetoric. It is a response. There is a stimulus in grammar input. Without some form of thought, there is only stimulus-response automated programming. With greater thought comes more freedom of choice and will. Humans have higher order consciousness and have the greater potential capacity for thought and logic on this planet. The greatest potential capacity for thought and logic. But we often fall short of living up to our potential, and that's the sad case. We have so much potential and value, but we're not living up to it. It's being squandered, wasted, and quite frankly used against us. If the grammar and logic is accurate and the right is known along with the wrong, yet someone chooses the wrong over the right in their output action or simpler rhetoric and communication, then the logic is still the problem in the end somewhere at some root level that has them choose evil over good, or the care. The care and the logic, that's why they're in the central importance. There's a logic and care issue. There's a problem in your understanding of reality as to why you should choose good over evil, right over wrong. There's a problem in your logical processing of reality that prevents you from understanding that. Part of that is care, because care and logic go together. If you have logic devoid of care, well, you're going to choose wrong because you have no understanding of what's the importance of good and right and truth. And logic is concerned with truth, so I would say you wouldn't even have logic. You'd have a corrupted form of logic, which is the point of the dark trivium, is you don't have Sorry, I'm looking at my infographic and I put dark care, but why didn't I have knowledge? I didn't put grammar, logic, and rhetoric. I only put the natural law expressive aspects. Anyways, that's just a note on my infographic. The negative circle of life, the limited trivium, you can apply a similar aspect of limited grammar, limited logic, and limit rhetoric. But for the dark one, it'd be dark grammar to get to dark. Well, grammar is the same for everybody, I suppose. It's the input. I guess I shouldn't be contemplating the issues with my infographic in my audio. Anyways, just to say that the corrupted logic will greatly affect your ability to process reality. Because if you don't understand truth over falsity, right over wrong, good over evil, then you're not even going to be capable of using logic correctly, because logic is wholly concerned with truth. So if you don't even understand the importance or the need of truth over falsity, then you won't even be able to use logic, and that's why it's a corrupted logic. So I should add at the bottom, or where dark care is in the dark negative false trivium, a corrupted logic, which is what allows you, or is what puts you into that position, along with the dark care, to not care, to do right over wrong, is because you don't even understand, you don't even have logic. You have a corrupted logic. And that's when your logic is corrupted, your care is corrupted. When your logic is well developed, your care will be more well developed as well. And that's why true care has to do with care for truth and morality. There's another correspondence I just made right now about all the work I'm doing. Awesome. If your care is corrupted, your logic will be corrupted. And if your logic is corrupted, your care is corrupted. And you can just come to mind all those fake Trivium users, all those people who can't discern reality correctly. Well, you can see how their care and morality, their care for truth and morality is not as developed as other people who understand reality more correctly and can correctly align their behaviors with morality, as opposed to just believe whatever they want because they don't really care for truth and morality in other beings, because they don't actually have logic properly developed as a tool within their consciousness. Alright, so to continue, I guess I'll just reread that small paragraph. If the grammar and logic is accurate, and the right is known along with the wrong, yet someone chooses the wrong over the right in their output action, or simpler rhetoric in communication, then the logic is still the problem in the end somewhere at some root level that has them choose evil over good. Rhetoric is the output from the free will choice in knowing good and evil, right and wrong, and so to choose the wrong is in your formulation of logic to make that choice. So if you have corrupted care, your logic is going to convince you that it's okay. The logic and the care are linked. That's why they're in the middle. Oh yeah, check out my Circle of Life infographic. It'll be more visual for you there. In some cases, it seems the lack of true care is what corrupts the proper, fuller logical understanding. The dark care or apathy is going to underlie the choice in objectively knowing right from wrong, yet still choosing the wrong. The logic is flawed, for if it were known why good is better than evil in all choices objectively, the logic would be sound and lead to the right action. But since this is not chosen, then the person is not using sound logic and concludes evil is better, at least for themselves, in a lack of consideration for others. The lack of care, apathy, or the dark care to do evil underlies the corruption of logic. They don't care for others, so the logic never arrives at the feedback conclusion about true morality and rights. Thought and emotion feed back. Care and logic feed back. Your direction of thought will be affected by your care, and your care will be affected by your thought and logical conclusions. It can be a self-perpetual trap from dark care to corrupted logic and grammar input, also ignorance, and back to reinforce the dark care again. The dark care can either limit correct input from grammar and true honest processing, or not limit it by simply always choosing the wrong and evil, no matter what input is provided, to show good is better for them in the long run. As a game theory, it is win-win instead of dark force of win-lose domination. The next section, subsection 4.2.2, rhetorical spectrum. True rhetoric deals with honest dialect to express truth. There is a rhetorical spectrum or rhetorical duality dichotomy that shows there is this honest dialectic between ourselves and others, and there is the sophist rhetoric of influence and favor to win and get people to accept what is being sold, true or not. There is the original Trivium method, which is the positive trivium of light and good, concerned foremost with truth, truth itself as the means, goal, and expression. There is also the classical trivium, the dark and evil negative trivium, concerned foremost with effective oration, effective speech, effective rhetoric, and effective convincing of something. By effective, they merely want their message to take effect in the receiver. That is all. Not that it is necessarily the whole truth they can express to the person, or even a truth at all as an overall concept. The rhetorical skill is used to convince, motivate, persuade, and inform in order to, quote, win people over to accepting a concept. This motivation for use can become problematic. It's outright dishonest, first of all, if that's your motivation, and not truth foremost. The Trivium method has logic central, the art of arts, concerned with thinking itself and with truth itself. Truth is simply what is. The grammar and other derivatives we can uncover that is. I'm just saying the grammar is part of what is, and the derivatives of grammar are part of what is, because that's the input. We can speak plainly and simply as things are, without obfuscation, euphemisms, etc. Straightforward, forthright, honest, frank, to the point. Dialectic is to establish a truth from opposing views, to reconcile through logic of correct thought, reason. A dialogue can be had with yourself, to be curious, doubt, and question on your own, or with the help of others. Rhetoric often loses sight of this search for truth, which is central to the trivium, and people get focused on minor fallacies rather than the actual truth presented that they don't want to look at. More on this below. The light and dark aspects of the trivium can be mirrored in the rhetorical use of appeals. Logos or rational appeal, pathos or emotional appeal, and ethos or ethical appeal can all be used for light or dark. The light can get people to understand reality from the aspects of consciousness we have to experience reality, thought, emotion, and action. The dark uses the skills and knowledge of how consciousness learns about reality to manipulate how people understand reality. Emotional appeals are not always fallacious and has a proper and right purpose. There is dual purpose in emotions, even in the negative ones, such as the positive and negative in anger, for instance. The emotional appeal is not to be used to avoid truth and silence the truth that hurts you. It is not to trick people with emotional ploys and tactics, but to show people emotional truth of reality, to feel reality, to care about what is being done that should not be done. Show them reality, evoke emotional truth about wrongs, and have them face that reality they are ignoring and don't want to face. There is good and bad to emotional appeal. One for truth, the other to manipulate against truth and get personal desires fulfilled through emotional acceptance of the falsity of unreality. The dark side of the trivium promotes effective acceptance of a message in the delivery output phase, not necessarily the truth of reality. Other tools like NLP, neurolinguistic programming, NVC, nonviolent communication, etc., can also be used in conjunction to further get your message to be accepted by others. People can know how to bypass obstacles and barriers in consciousness. Although many hinder us, many also help to protect us. There are those who engage in this form of rhetoric to win people over to their argument because they honestly think it is the, quote, right, good, and true thing to do. But they will end up going down a winding road, diverging from a straight, direct path. There will be convoluted mental gymnastics involved to placate delicate sensibilities that differ from person to person in order to conform to variable minds that can't handle the simple, direct truth as it is. This can be effective indeed, but sidesteps for a long time. That's the winding road. You diverge. It can go on for a long time, the sidestepping. Sometimes this work is effective, but much of the time I have found these obstacles and objections to simply be excuses people will not let go of. They simply direct truth in more effect. The simple direct truth is more effective in the end for everyone. Effective rhetoric to, quote, win people over is preferred when you want to manipulate people and not simply let the truth you speak represent itself in full detail and view as you express it as such. This is not to say knowledge and truth don't take time and don't progress to higher levels through degrees and grades, because they do. I'm not talking about that aspect of reality here, so to be clear, I'm not talking about how we naturally have to go through prerequisites to reach certain higher levels of understanding. The rhetorician, the manipulator, is trying to get us to accept something. They're only looking at getting us to accept a certain message, and they'll focus on any way to get us to accept it, even if it's manipulative. Whereas if you're focused on truth, you don't do that. The dark aspects of the rhetorical duality includes debating, to beat down, beat completely, i.e. to win your argument; sophistry, wise, clever, in convincing speech, not necessarily truth; and to gain favor, appeals to get you to like them, the message deliverer, in order to like what they say. The favor is important to manipulators, the gaining of favor, as you are less likely to listen, let alone accept the message, if they are telling you things you really don't want to hear, which is what the truth does much of the time. The need to gain your favor in order for their words to have more weight and impact on you. They need to gain your favor for that. If they get you to like them, then they have influence upon you and can get you to more likely accept what they have to say or sell, as the concepts are being sold for others to buy into and affect how they live their lives. Here's a quote from a Wikipedia page on dialectic. The sophists taught artistic quality in oratory, motivation via speech, as a manner of demonstrating one's arete. Oratory was taught as an art form used to please and to influence other people via excellent speech. So politics is all about sophistry, motivation through speech, regardless of truth or proof, as an art or oratory skill. Original sophistry was good in meaning and purpose, but it got corrupted and turned into all about how good you are at convincing someone of something, even if it is bullshit. You were a, quote, good person because you were, quote, good at convincing people of things. So I have likened the Trivium method to, since I have likened the Trivium method to the natural law expressions and alchemy, we can also look at the dark trivium as the dark side of the force. This is my other work, the natural law force, the web of reality that we interact in. What is the dark side of the force? It is a force we embody in our thoughts, in our thought processing, and ultimately in our output and actions, to seek to manipulate through the power of the force of thought. The light trivium is like natural law expressions and alchemy, representative of aspects of the force of truth, love, good, right, morality, natural law, etc., the aspects of transcendental being. The dark force is falsity, fear, evil, wrong, immorality, etc., the lack of the force that is. This goes into the duality of truth and falsity, good and evil. Look into my presentation on the dualistic conceptual framework, or my article and audio on truth is love. That one goes into it as well. Subsection 423, fallacy. People can become fallacy obsessed and think a fallacy demonstrates a falsity in reality when it actually only demonstrates a falsity or error in reasoning, not an error of the conclusion itself, but in explaining the conclusion. The fallacy in explaining a wrong or erroneous conclusion can indicate that this is how someone arrived at the wrong conclusion. Fallacies are helpful to show people why their conclusions are false, if they are indeed false, because their reasoning is faulty, which is why they arrived at that faulty conclusion. Someone can use fallacious statements that are erroneous while advocating for a verifiable truth. The truth that they are talking is true, but the way they delivered the truth had errors. But most people can still understand the truth delivered. So you don't need to focus on the fallacies if what they're saying is true. You can help them and correct their fallacies, which will correct their thought processes, but you're not going to say, oh, well, what you're saying is wrong because of fallacy. Well, what they're saying could be true. The use of fallacies does not automatically invalidate a proposition or conclusion. They get stuck in the delivery, the rhetoric of the delivery of the message. Does it have any fallacies? Rather than looking at what is said. So people get stuck in the delivery rather than looking at what's said. If the conclusion is erroneous, then fallacies can be demonstrated to show how the person is not reasoning accurately. To claim a conclusion is false because there are any amount of fallacies is a fallacy. To claim a conclusion is false without even looking into it honestly, without curiosity, critical thinking, and objective detachment from ourselves, is a fallacy of the mind itself. Anal logic is not real logic. Look at the truth being expressed, not the rhetorical form of the message alone. If someone expresses a fallacy but speaks the truth about reality, then it is still truth. Rhetorical focus on the message delivery first and not truth first is indicative of the poisoned classical trivium focus on manipulation rather than truth. When you only point out the fallacies while ignoring the truth or falsity of the conclusion, you tend to sidetrack the issue. Fallacies need to be pointed out when they prevent access to truth. Fallacies used to express a truth is erroneous in its expression, but still has the truth at its core, inside, internally, in substance. So yes, sometimes people fail to express things accurately, and you can point it out. If they are expressing a truth, but do it incorrectly, as with a fallacy, you cannot simply deny their conclusion while only focusing on the fallacy used to demonstrate it. Next subsection, 4.2.4, this is winding road, which I mentioned above, winding road, as opposed to the straight path, truth. So the infographic has a winding, twisted path versus straight, direct path to truth. So you got a bunch of obstacles in the mind, barriers to self-knowledge, all these things, different barriers, different obstacles. So when you do in the rhetoric, is that you avoid offending people's delicate sensibilities. You're trying to bypass obstacles and barriers. In the straight direct path, you're just going with truth. You're cutting through the BS. You just say it like it is, and you slice the falsity that gets hit with the sword, and you deal with anything that needs to be dealt with when you need to deal with it. You're not bypassing things and trying to subvert people's minds. You're just dealing with the truth, and that's it, and you're letting it speak. So this is not a blank slate to be an asshole, though. To call people excessively harmful names and say that is cutting through BS or that's like it is, that's a falsity. You can't just do that and claim, well, I'm just cutting through the BS. You can't just be any asshole and just speak bullshit and claim that you're speaking truth. So the winding road, related to the obsession with fallacies in the message delivery instead of truth itself, is the sophist rhetoric of wanting a message to simply be accepted and using whatever sophisticated methods of delivery a message, NLP, neuro-linguistic programming for example, is valid to have someone accept the message. I'm going to reread that. Related to the obsession with fallacies and the message delivery instead of truth itself is the sophist rhetoric of wanting a message to simply be accepted and using whatever sophisticated methods of delivering a message is valid to have someone accept the message. So that's why you have neuro-linguistic programming, you have NVC. You're just looking at having people accept the message. That's all you want. Instead of having someone accept the message from the bare truth itself contained within, you want to manipulate and massage the truth into a palatable message for others to accept. Some may say it doesn't matter if not all the truth is spoken of accurately, spoken of as plainly and honestly as it appears in reality, as long as the main concept in the message is accepted. The focus is the message, not the truth therein. When you sacrifice the truth so easily in favor of effective acceptance of a message, you will inhibit your own ability to discern truth effectively, and as a result often merely defend a falsity as truth, convincing people of falsities as truth, because your primary focus was on the presentation, the appearance, the effectiveness of the receptivity of the message, instead of the truth first itself as what is given in a message. Manipulative tools like NLP and the dark side of tools like NVC, classical Trivium, etc. can be used to gain favor in people's minds and hearts towards what you are saying, and therefore uncritically accept it. It is very clever sophistry. Focusing on the message output is a blinding factor that prevents us from focusing on the truth itself that is contained in the message output. You can get lost in wasted time trying to show people pointless fallacies that don't stop them from seeing the truth. And you can get lost in winding road sophistry to try to get people to accept a concept you want them to accept. The truth that is spoken for the truth speaks for itself as the truth. The truth spoken in tongues, twisted, winding gymnastics to massage it into people is not direct truth, but gets morphed and reshaped, and this can lead to alterations. And then it's no longer the truth, is it, when it's altered? The last section, subsection 4.2.5, greater good manipulation. The methodology of the Trivium can be a negative and manipulated against us to control us with the, quote, greater good, greater than ourselves, service to others, oneness, interconnected feeling to be inspired towards and achieve a goal. The dark Trivium user can control us into maintaining false reality constructs while thinking these illusions are, quote, good and, quote, moral endeavors to give our time, attention, and energy to. We can conform to truth or the consequences of going against truth and morality. There is the conformity to truth or falsity and lies. Giving ourselves to something larger than us, the, quote, greater good, can often be the conformity with falsity and evil, rather than the substantive truth and good we believe the appearances to be. Evil cloaks itself in the appearance of truth and good, of righteousness, while creating fear, ignorance, apathy, cowardice, and laziness. We can easily be deceived by our undeveloped state of consciousness and lack of objective critical thinking into larger agendas that we are convinced are good, but are not, such as the, quote, global unity blindness that is not founded in natural moral law reality. We seek purpose and meaning in life, both in ourselves and in reality. We use language to correspond different meanings and communicate about reality. We attribute meaning to things in reality that we can uncover. We also give ourselves, our energy, our time to that which we find has the most meaning. Those things we find are sometimes not simply found, but are fed to us, sold to us, and we willingly buy into them. So the things we find sometimes, they're not simply found by happenstance. They're actually fed to us and sold to us, and then we buy into them. So government service, military service, police service, pleasure service, many other things. People have an idea of what is important with a given meaning and purpose and give themselves to it in large part. Because it is bigger than themselves individually, it is part of a collective that is larger than any one member. They become part of a universal, although it's an artificial universal constructed from the unreality of men. This is recognized subconsciously as a desire, despite the conscious mind being unaware of what is happening. This provides a sense of belonging, part of greater family, a greater collective, a sense of purpose with that belonging. These are basic desires we have, and they can be manipulated into pre-selected pathways to channel our energy and behavior in life. Only the evolution in consciousness to develop conscious awareness of reality and these mechanisms in ourselves will allow us to be free from all the mind control and change ourselves in alignment with good and not evil. The dark occultist manipulators know many of the motivational factors human beings have and use them to manipulate us, while we remain ignorant of these inner capacities and their outer ramifications. So, we are born into the world blind, with eyes closed. We are blindly being led, following others. We want to feel connected to others, so we unite along a common idea, a universal greater than ourselves or any other person, and connect with those people in that specific group. This connection can be an attachment that creates in-group versus out-group favoritism and behavior that disregards truth and morality in favor of maintaining the attached dogma. And this is what it is in racism, sexism, speciesism, everything. It's not racism. The root is in-group, out-group behaviors in psychology. This is what they're all rooted in. So if we want to say the cop problem, oh, it's racism. Well, racism is a later manifestation of this in-group, out-group. It applies in any group. You could apply it in skin color. You could apply it in jobs. The police apply it to themselves, and everyone else is everyone else. It's an in-group, out-group problem. And from that, you get racism, you get sexism, and deeper than those ones is even speciesism. But in-group, out-group is the underlying mechanism that creates the split and separation and disconnection between us and others. There's a little bit of psychology added in there. But there was one sentence left to this paragraph. We hand ourselves over to this power and let it use us. This connection, I was talking about the connection and being part of the group greater than ourselves. This connection can be an attachment that creates in-group versus out-group favoritism and behavior that disregards truth and morality in favor of maintaining the attached dogma. We hand ourselves over to this power and let it use us. We become a tool for the dark side of the force, like I was mentioning earlier, for falsity, evil, wrong, immorality. Ivy League schools train people in the classical trivium in how to use these tools to promote their chances of success and survival within the various systems we have constructed to enslave ourselves in economic survivability. The negative classical trivium enables you to be a clever orator to convince and influence people effectively to win and get your way. This training is the dark trivium, the negative trivium, quote, my freedom, my truth, my survival, which relates to Satanism, Carnism, and Solipsism, which is, it's all about me. That's what they all relate to, because it is all about yourself in Satanism, Carnism, and Solipsism. They're all my freedom, my truth, my survival. People who are academically trained or otherwise learn to be manipulative can outmaneuver other people and appear to, quote, win arguments, but it's all a sham, an illusion, a magic trick of word spells cast on our minds, but most people can't see it for what it is. Many others believe their own bullshit, and they spread lies as if they were truth, honestly, because they have not established correct, firm, solid, grounded foundations in reality from truth and morality. So they perpetuate the lies because they haven't verified those lies themselves. The falsity keeps spreading because they don't care for truth enough to verify the things that are told to them. The care for truth develops over time. You have to have the initial care to get out of the coffin, the tomb, from the unawakened, uninitiated, unbegun, and begin, awaken, initiate yourself as the fool on the path and journey, but not as the ignorant fool, as I mentioned in another article in the 5-part series. It was in the part 1 or 2, I forget. You got to be the fool who initiates themselves on the journey, not the ignorant fool. So, but it's all a sham and illusion, a magic trick of word spells cast on our minds. But most people can't see it for what it is. Many other people believe their own bullshit, and they spread lies as if they were truth, honestly, because they have not established correct, firm, solid, grounded foundations in reality from truth and morality. Those who fail to use the truth and trivium method will often relegate to denial of their immorality and wrongdoing. So here's one for all the plants people, and they just humans aren't animals and everything. What they believe in is animals matter morally. What? Question mark? Huh? Psh, I deny that reality. That's what happens when people fail to understand the importance of truth and morality. They fail to care for it deeply. They fail to develop the Trivium method. They fail to develop logic. They just deny their immorality because they're not objectively looking at themselves and reality. It's subjective inner reality trying to create unreality into reality. So someone tells them animals matter morally, they're like, what? They just deny that reality. They're not interested in looking into it honestly because they don't really care for truth and morality. They just want to believe whatever they want to believe. So that's the end of this article. Thank you for listening. This is part 4. The next one will be part 5, the last one in the series. So thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. Have a nice day. Take care. Peace.